In the year 1347, a whisper changed the course of history. Ships from the east were approaching Europe, their hulls heavy with silk, spice, and secrets. But this time, they carried no rats infested with disease. No invisible plague waited to unleash terror upon the world. The Black Death, the catastrophe that once claimed half of Europe's people, never came. And everything that followed was rewritten. The world prospered at first. The bustling cities of Florence, Paris, and London swelled with people, crafts, and ideas. Fields stayed full of laborers, noblemen kept their power, and the balance of society remained undisturbed. Without the plague to shatter the old world, the feudal system lingered far longer than history remembers. Lords tightened their grip, peasants found their hopes chained to the soil, and the dream of freedom was delayed for centuries. But in this alternate timeline, the seeds of something else began to grow. The Renaissance, born from both curiosity and the trauma of survival, bloomed slower. Art did not rush to capture the fragile beauty of human life because death was never at the door. Faith was never shaken in the same way. The people never questioned the church's silence in the face of divine punishment that never came. By the 1500s, Europe was crowded. Cities groaned under the weight of millions, and wars over land became fiercer. The Ottomans pressed into Europe, and kingdoms fought endlessly to feed their multitudes. Disease had been the world's cruel way of balancing its numbers. Without it, the imbalance grew. Hunger became the silent plague. Across the Channel, England never found the same burst of individualism that came in our real timeline. Without the labor shortage caused by the plague, serfs had no bargaining power. The economic revolution that created the middle class came late by centuries. The industrial dawn dimmed behind thick feudal clouds. America's story changed too. When explorers finally looked west, society back home was still ruled by medieval traditions. Colonization came not from merchants and thinkers seeking opportunity, but from kings and noblemen seeking dominion. The New World became an extension of the Old World's hierarchy. Castles rose where plantations would have been. Peasants crossed the sea, not for freedom, but to obey new masters under new suns. By 1700, innovation lagged behind by at least a century. No scientific revolution, no enlightenment in time to challenge monarchs. The telescope was a decade's secret experiment, forbidden by clergy who still ruled the minds of men. Newton's apple fell, but the idea of gravity was suppressed as heresy. And yet, humanity adapts. In the vast fields of Europe, inventors who toiled quietly began to ask forbidden questions. What if death was meant to remind us of change? What if survival without loss made us weaker? The echoes of those thoughts found their way into books that circulated underground, the beginning of a delayed awakening. Across the Atlantic, in distant colonies, whispers of rebellion still stirred. It wasn't about independence yet, but hunger, injustice, and the yearning for identity. The men who might have been merchants became lords, and the men who might have led revolutions were soldiers serving crowns they despised. But under it all was something unstoppable, the human need for transformation, even in a world that had refused to die. By the 1800s, technology finally began to stir. Steam engines emerged in silence, built not by established guilds but by outcasts. America, still divided by noble houses and feudal lines, began to fracture. A quiet, smoldering rebellion rose, not in the name of democracy, but equality. The words of a movement born too late began to resound. The right to rise, the right to breathe free, the right to be more than what birth allowed. And then, an unexpected twist in history. Without the centuries of survivors shaped by the Black Death's trauma, humanity lacked one critical trait: resilience in crisis. When industrial pollution began to sicken the cities, when new diseases emerged from unchecked population growth, society struggled to respond. Medicine had advanced slower, and fear of science held it back. Ironically, what had once been avoided now came for them in another form. The 21st century of this alternate world looked nothing like our own. Towering castles stood beside forgotten factories, forests overtook ancient roads, and faith still debated fact. The internet never came, for Galileo's telescope had been burned, and Newton's laws were lost. Nations rose not through innovation, but through inheritance. The United States as we know it never was. The land was divided among noble houses, still under the rule of kings beyond the sea. In the end, the question lingered: was it better to survive untouched, or to die and be reborn? Perhaps humanity's greatest progress comes not from avoiding catastrophe, but enduring it. Without the Black Death, we kept our world, but lost what made us human enough to rebuild it. Imagine that world flickering across your screen. Endless medieval cities under electric lights, kings in skyscrapers, peasants watching history replay itself. What if the Black Death never happened? Maybe we'd still be waiting for the moment that truly made us alive. The 20th century arrived in this alternate world, laced with old ambition and new longing. The city lights of Florence, Paris, and Boston glowed, but beneath the grandeur, tensions simmered. The new crown colonies, America under noble rule, were restless. Castles rose above factories, their stone walls shadowing iron works, as airships flew banners of ancient families. The streets thrummed with laborers, yet their voices were suppressed by monarchy and tradition. Technology flickered, forbidden in the hands of commoners, but nurtured underground by a culture thirsty for change. In 1907, a lightning storm swept over Boston. Jonathan Hale, the secret inventor, watched from his attic as electric arcs danced about the rooftops. He dreamed not of kings, but of equality. His clandestine work with copper filaments and chemical batteries had stirred something new and dangerous. News of his invention spread among the poor, igniting fires of hope. But, as with all revolutions in a world where old power clings tight, the nobles acted swiftly. Hale was denounced as a heretic, his laboratory set ablaze by order of Duke Pembroke. Instead of sparking an industrial revolution, his discoveries become smuggled treasures, venerated almost as forbidden relics. In New York, where Gothic spires pierced the skyline, Lady Eleanor de Saint was gathering her own following. Daughter of a merchant stolen by nobility, she sought to overturn the feudal laws. From hidden chambers beneath Trinity Church, she organized clandestine assemblies. They debated philosophy that had never been allowed: Locke's rights, Rousseau's democracy, Galileo's stars. Each gathering risked death for the promise of a future shaped by more than bloodline and royal decree. By 1915, the first real uprising shook the colonies. Railway workers rose in defiant strikes, demanding not just wages but voices. Aristocrats dispatched armored cavalry. The battle for Boston raged for weeks. Steam-powered rifles against horsemen, barricades built from printing presses and barrels of saltpeter. In the ashes, the rebels were crushed, but stories spread faster than flames. Word of the insurrection found its way across the Atlantic, inspiring radicals in Paris, London, and Florence to plot their own resistance. Europe itself was fraying. The Ottoman Empire pressed harder. Old alliances failed, and civil conflicts erupted among the nobility. Monarchs attempted reforms, but their hands were tied by centuries of tradition, as if the world itself was one vast, gilded cage. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, underground inventors advanced science with brute force and desperation. The world lagged behind our own timeline. No radio, no telephone. Instead, messengers braved midnight roads. The transatlantic steam vessel, the Liberty Star, carried secret communiques of the rebellion. The Industrial Revolution, delayed and distorted, twisted cities into chaotic labyrinths. Factories billowed smog over palaces, while noble families dined above the clouds. Literally, as Paris built palatial airships, floating salons for elite gatherings away from dying city streets. A second plague gripped the world, not biological but the unrest born of inequality. In Boston, waves of protests became monthly, then weekly, then daily. Eleanor de Saint forged unimaginable alliances. Inventors, outcasts, runaway monks. She rallied a movement known as the Guiding Light, promising an end to hereditary rule and the birth of something new: rights, dignity, voice. By 1942, the Second Feudal War began, this time not with swords, but improvised rifles and chemical bombs. Castles fell, cathedrals burned, the nobility fled west. A new order emerged from the rubble. The Free Confederacy, a union of the former New Crown colonies, declared independence from Europe. Its founding charter was a patchwork of Locke's philosophy, Hale's science, and Eleanor's vision. They rebuilt Boston not as a city of kings, but as a sanctuary for learning and invention. Feudal lines dissolved in the east, but the west remained stubborn, divided by lords who clung to power. Across the Atlantic, Europe transformed in lightning flashes of violence and progress. Paris elected its first council of peers, citizens selected by merit, not birth. Florence opened the doors to the forbidden libraries. Scientists exiled for heresy pioneered new machines. Their inventions spread as fast as laws allowed. From Vienna and Berlin, networks of underground thinkers shared blueprints, poetry, and political manifestos. But transformation came with pain. The world swelled too fast. In 1972, a disaster in Berlin's fusion plant unleashed the ash years, a catastrophe that killed millions. Skies darkened, crops failed, and for the first time since the plague that never came, hunger ghosted across every continent. Cities emptied, echoing with loss. The survivors gathered beneath the ruined arches and asked, if the Black Death had come, would we have learned these lessons sooner? With loss, the world grew humble. The Free Confederacy sent envoys to Florence and Paris, sharing science and hope. The earth slowly healed. Refugees planted new crops in the shadow of castles. Inventors created clean energy from sunlight and wind. Children learned in schools built atop the ruins. By 2100, democracy flourished across most of America and Europe. No kings remained. All voices mattered. But this world was birthed by a longer, darker pain. Its music was mournful. Its stories reminded people. Progress comes not just from invention, but from the courage to challenge what is old, to endure loss, and to rise, even when hope seems impossible. As the video closes, a young child in Boston stares into the lens, the city behind him a mosaic of stone, iron, and green. He holds a battered book, heirloom of centuries, history, how we tried, failed, learned, changed. The screen fades among images of old castles, burning cities, and new communities, underscoring one final lesson. Sometimes the greatest challenge is not surviving the worst moment, but building a future from all the moments we refuse to face. The world had survived the ash years, emerging into the 22nd century with scars and wisdom. Societies rebuilt not only their cities, but also their ways of thinking. Where once the inherited rule of kings held sway, now a great open council, the Civic Assembly, guided the Free Confederacy and Europe alike. Castles became museums, showing relics of feudalism and reminders of the price of stagnation. Education became the new path to power. At the heart of every community stood places for learning, teaching history not as a static record but as a living lesson. Children grew up with the story of the plague that never came, and what its absence had cost their ancestors. Old questions found new meaning. What makes a society resilient? Is progress born from pain or from vision? In the grand city of Florence, an artist named Sofia Bellini sparked a new cultural movement. Her work combined classical sculpture with the shattered machinery of past revolutions, embodying both loss and hope. On opening night, her gallery filled with images of old monarchs and new inventors, broken swords fused with copper wires, a visual chronicle of transformation. Philosophers and scientists, once hunted by nobles, now led public dialogues broadcast across continents. In Boston, teachers debated the virtues of adversity, drawing lessons from the ash years. In Paris, mathematicians opened the forbidden library at last, sharing works of suppressed genius that had waited centuries for daylight. Global communication accelerated. Instead of the internet, the wise net emerged, a decentralized network run by community councils, designed to protect freedom of thought and respect for history. Travelers sent messages not only across oceans but between cultures, stories, warnings, ideas. As prosperity grew, so too did self-awareness. Humanity learned that strength wasn't just surviving disaster, but choosing to change when comfortable. Sophia's Broken Revolution sculptures traveled the world, displayed in squares from Sao Paulo to Shanghai. The taglines at each exhibit read, "What we didn't learn, we had to discover again." Occasional struggles reminded people of the old world's dangers. Climate events forced adaptation. Artificial intelligence, slow to develop, finally gained social acceptance as a tool of the wise, not the rulers. At the first Global Civic Summit in New York, children of descendants lit lanterns at the base of the old Duke's Castle, now the Institute for Future Studies. They recited their pledge. "We honor truth, seek change, and heal our history. In this future, empathy outweighed war." Memory became their greatest resource. New holidays marked not battles lost or kings crowned, but the birth of libraries, the fall of tyranny, and the moments when humanity chose courage over comfort. The camera pans wide, capturing millions moving between towering green cities and ancient stone courtyards. The voiceover softens. "In a world where catastrophe passed us by, our greatest lesson was this: silence and comfort breed dormant hearts. Loss awakens vision. Progress is the gift we give to pain." As the video glides to its closing frame, the hourglass returns, sand rising, stars visible through its glass walls, echoing a world that finally learned to use its time wisely.